Hey guys, I'm EveAnna Manley from Manley Labs, and today we're going to talk about the variable mu. Now, the variable mu has been around for an awfully long time, but some people don't really know what the history of that unit is. Where did it come from? So I'm going to tell you all about that today. So mu is a Greek letter, and in the tube world, we call that gain. That's what mu means. And we pronounce it kind of like a mewing cat, mew. Not necessarily like what a cow says, moo. So the term variable mu actually came from inside one of those old vacuum tube books. Manufacturers of the vacuum tubes, they used to produce books of specifications. And one of these tube types that has the grid that's spaced differently in the center than it is on the edges, that type of tube is called a variable mu dual triode. This tube is elegantly able to change its own gain depending on how we bias it. So the first Manley variable mu was initially called, a very exciting name, of the limiter compressor amplifier. And it was a mono unit. And originally it was in a 1.5U chassis size case. David Manley developed it based on a very obscure Danish broadcast unit called a DISA. And it was a cassette limiter that was used primarily for the Danish broadcast. And it was a very classic tube limiter from the 50s or 60s. And David had one of these things, and he sought to kind of make something that was similar to that. The first stereo variable mu unit, that's where the name variable mu got put on the faceplate. That was developed in our first year at Manley Labs in 1993, after we had separated from the prior company. We've been making these things for an awfully long time. Okay, so over the years, we've come up with some secret and not so secret modifications. The first one was called the high-pass filter mod, and it introduces some capacitors in the sidechain drive that select the frequency below which the unit will not respond. So that's why they're called a high pass. The higher frequencies can get through and the lower ones cannot. So what that does is it makes the unit not just be driven by the loudest thing, i.e. the kick drum or the bass guitar. So it allows the unit to function without just being pushed by those things. Another aftermarket modification is the MS mod. On old Fairchilds, you might have seen that as vertical lateral. You can make the overall result more mono sounding by compressing more of the out of phase information, or alternatively, you can make something sound a lot more wide by compressing the mono information and leaving the out of phase information untouched. It all relates to the phasing information when you're having to cut a record. In the old days, of course, if you have something that's way too stereo or way too out of phase, you're going to actually create lift outs in the record. So you want to purposely keep things a little more mono. So that's initially why those types of modifications were done on the old Fairchilds and on the Manley variable mu. The TBar Mod. Back in the 1990s, we had tons of 6386 dual triodes. And those are the exact same tube that's used in the old Fairchilds. And of course, everyone loves that tube. It's a true variable mu tube. That means it has a variable pitch grid spacing. It's a real variable mu tube. So we initially were using those until they all ran out. And as you know, they're very hard to get these days. So we replaced that tube with another tube. Now, some people are like, but the old tubes were just so much smoother sounding, and I could compress more before I would really hear it. So Paul, who's our service guy, he developed a thing called the TBar Mod, where he's using 2 remote cutoff pentodes, wired as triodes, so 2 separate bottles that plug into a board that plugs into that original 6386 socket. If you're digging really deep, like 6 to 10 or more dBs of limiting or compressing, and you want it more smooth down there, then go for the TBar Mod. Y'all know that we do make dedicated mastering versions of the variable mu, and those have stepped input, output, and threshold controls, replacing the smooth pots of the regular versions. Those switches are gold contact switches with 1% metal film resistors, so you have precise recallability and exact repeatability. And we know you mastering guys really like that kind of precision. So we wanted to make a unit that reacted like the variable mu, but didn't have this overbearing, thick tone to it. So we decided to combine the front end of the variable mu, that's the input transformer, and the TBar mod as stock with an all discrete solid state output stage and transformerless output stage. So it combines the action of the variable mu with a much more neutral overall tone. This is really well suited for, modern music where you want it cleaner overall. You don't want this giant footprint of the original variable mu all over the place. You want it more neutral. You want cleaner, punchier bass, etc. So as you know, we've been building these things for an awfully long time, and there's a very long history of Manley variable mus out there. And I can't cover it all right here, right now for you, but if you need more information, be sure to head on over to www.manley.com, and you'll find a whole ton of information on our website. Thanks for watching.